and welcome to this second vlog of workspaceguru.com. In this vlog we're going to talk about virtual GPUs. With me is Patrick van der Born, he's a virtual GPU expert. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Patrick van der Born, a freelance workspace consultant per the 1st of September, so it's a new area for me. I'm a Citrix CTA and I'm also part of the team RGE, it's the Remote Graphic Experts community. And in my daily work I'm focusing on end-user computing, GPUs, automation and public cloud. So
really the exciting stuff at the moment, right?
Yeah, of course, it's a very interesting job. So you have the right person for the vGPUs in your vlog, Chris.
Great. Well, for the people who don't know me, I'm Chris Twiest. I'm the owner of workspaceguru.com. I work at Dayton as a principal consultant, mainly focusing on standardizing new ways of work and doing a lot of pre-sales and sales engineering. So why did we choose vGPUs as a topic for this vlog? Well, first of all, of course, Patrick, you're an expert on the subject matter. But secondly, it's getting more and more important to know how to configure vGPUs right. Because we see it more and more in the market that people who use VDI solutions use them with vGPUs. And you also seen that in the market too, and me too, at customers, that there's a lot of misconfigurations and people don't really know sometimes what they're doing. So we wrote down 5 tips for you, and we will go over that and see, at least hopefully give you some extra knowledge about vGPUs and maybe how to improve your performance with them. Why do you think at the moment that it's important to know this stuff, to know the vGPUs?
Okay, what I see a lot of customers who are having a GPU in their VDI or server-based computer environment, it's very complex. Like, it's not just adding a GPU to your gaming desktop and then everything works, because you have a lot of external complexity, like latency on the remoting protocol types, and which type of GPU you want to add to your VDI environment. And even a VDI or a server-based computer environment, it works differently when using, for example, CAD applications or just Office applications. So I see a lot of wrong configurations in this part, and then you have a decreased user experience. And I think adding a GPU to your environment is increasing the user experience, like the user experience to your VDI environment, like they're experiencing their Windows 10 device at home.
Yeah, because at home you probably have a GPU. So, and Windows 10 is expecting a GPU.
Exactly.
Okay, so this vlog will be a little bit more technical than the last one. So the audience for this vlog is really people, system administrators who are dealing with vGPU and want to know more about it. So with that being said, let's go to our first tip. Our first tip is know your workload / your applications. So Patrick, you came up with the tip. Can you please tell us more about why that's important?
Yeah, if you want to add a GPU to your environment, you will do that because you have some kind of workload or expectation of your end user why you need a GPU. So what I see in the field is that a lot of IT administrators don't know the workload. So when you add a GPU to your VDI environment, it's very important to know if the application is using a GPU or not. Because if an application just show a lot of graphical stuff, it doesn't mean it will use a GPU. Okay, because it's not programmed to use a GPU.
So sometimes applications who you think are really graphical and stuff actually are not written to render that on the GPU, and they just render it on the CPU.
Exactly. Okay. Like, for example, in the Netherlands, in the government world, we have a program called ArcGIS. Yeah. And the new ArcGIS is using a GPU, but the very old one isn't using a GPU, but it's showing you a lot of graphical information. So a lot of people think adding a GPU will increase the user experience with this application. But for example, this application use a lot of data files.
Yeah.
So you increase the user experience by adding fast storage for this type of application. So it's very good to know your application, and if you don't know the behavior of your application, I'm using Uber Agent. You can install Uber Agent on your endpoints, and you can measure the GPU usage per application. So it will give you insights over time, which applications use GPU or which applications do not use GPU. And Uber Agent can also give you an insight about the amount of frame buffer used by a GPU, so you can do sizing with Uber Agent for this.
It's of course not only Uber Agent, Control does the same, and I think there are some others out there. But the main thing, of course, is if you measure it, you know it. So it's a Dutch saying also, make this later. You measure it, and then you know it, and then you can act on it. So without the information, you cannot act on it and cannot make the right decisions. So
exactly, and the second thing is also choosing the right GPU. So there are a lot of different GPU types in the market, like Intel Iris, AMD is coming with a GPU, but also NVIDIA has a lot of different GPUs for different workloads. Like example, if you're looking at the M10, it's designed for user density. So if you have office workers, maybe that's the right GPU for you. But if you want to do deep learning, for example, maybe you will need to choose for a P40, or maybe a T4 is better for you.
So also it's important for companies to know, like, do you want to give a good user experience on something simple like YouTube, for example? Because there are all kinds of different issues with YouTube and the different graphics cards, right?
Exactly, and you have to select the right GPU. For example, the YouTube example you're giving here, it's like YouTube has its own codec. It's called VP9.
Okay.
And they have that codec because they don't have to pay any royalties. So if they're using H.264, they have to pay royalties when you're playing a YouTube video in H.264.
And that are a lot of videos, so...
Yeah, a lot of video streams, so a lot of royalties.
Yeah.
So, for example, the M10, it's based on the Maxwell GPU, doesn't have a decoding chip for VP9.
Okay.
So if you want to play YouTube videos in your VDI environment, then maybe it's a better selection for you to choose for a Pascal or higher series, like a Pascal or a Tesla, which has a VP9 decoder. Yeah. And for example, if you are playing VP9 YouTube movies in your VDI and you have an M10, it will use the CPU for the decoding part.
Yeah, so companies are really thinking, well, we're going to give our office workers a great experience, we're going to make sure that Word and etc. run smooth and they can watch some YouTube videos, so we're going to get that M10 and we're going to give that in the SBC server, and they end up with streaming YouTube and it's all going to the CPU. So that's a bad user experience. So and that's why it's important.
Yeah, for YouTube it also behaves different in different browsers like Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox or Chrome. There are possibilities to still play the movies in H.264, so to decode it on the M10 H.264 decoder, but you have to implement some tweaks to your VDI environment.
Okay, so it is possible, but
I don't know for how long, because it will cost YouTube royalties to play the H.264.
So again, with this tip, it's really important to get to know your workload and get to know your application and know which features are compatible with which graphic card. So really make a study of it before spending the money on those cards.
Exactly, and maybe you have some just for the office workers, so you don't have any need for a high-end GPU, just for the basic stuff. On the other hand, if you're doing CAD or some modeling like CAD, CATIA, SolidWorks, Bentley MicroStation, maybe you need more high-end GPUs. Or maybe if you're doing some strength calculations, just for double precision on the GPU, maybe you need to select a more high-end GPU to make the strength calculations going faster in your VDI environment.
So our second tip is vGPU profile sizing choice. So choose the right size for your virtual GPU, because a lot of you already know, of course, that vGPUs, you're also it's usually one physical GPU that you're slicing into virtual GPUs, and also make the right choice in which kind of virtual GPUs you're going to give your users, because we are also looking at some regulations and applications and stuff. For instance, with the Q profile on NVIDIA. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's very important, if you know the application from tip 1, that you size the right GPU profile, and from the GPU part it's mostly based on frame buffer, so that's the video memory, and you need to select the amount you want to add to a user. So for example, if you look at the NVIDIA card, like the T4 for example, you have some kind of system memory. I think the T4 is 16 gigabytes and the P4 is 8. So you can assign 16 gigabytes of frame buffer to your end user. But the amount of frame buffer needed by the end user, you have to select the right amount. So if you need 4 gigabytes for your application, you will have a performance degradation if you assign 2 gigabytes. So if you did the right measurements, you know the amount of frame buffer you need to assign to your user.
Yeah, so that's really the first step, right? Know the measurements, especially for something like frame buffer, so you can choose the right profile size. Yeah,
and then you got the profile type. It's like if you look to the NVIDIA, you got the basic ones, virtual PC, or for the applications, and you got the virtual Quadro data center workstation. I'm out full, but it's the Quadro line of the vGPU.
And you know that with the Q in the name of the profile.
Exactly.
Right?
It's Quadro, it's the Q.
Yeah.
And if you have an office worker, then you have enough for the virtual PC, it's the B profile. But if you are doing, for example, CATIA or SolidWorks, then you need the Q profile, and you have to dig into the application, which GPUs are supported. So if you go to the Autodesk website or the Bentley website, you can check out which type of GPUs are supported. And there are some special, like the aviation, they require that you use Quadro certified drivers, for example, to design an airplane on the computer.
So that's regulated, that you need to have a Quadro card. So even if I go out and I buy a Quadro M60, I put it in, and I then assign everyone a B profile, and I design my airplane, then it won't pass regulation because I didn't assign it with a Q profile, which is the Quadro, even though the physical GPU was a Quadro.
Yeah, so sometimes it's regulated that you need a Quadro profile of a Quadro driver. So if you have the B profile from NVIDIA, you don't have the Quadro features and don't have the Quadro driver.
Okay, so this is again actually a tip which really seemingly going into tip 1, right? Know your application, know your workload, know if you have those kinds of regulations, and again, measure everything so that you know everything.
Exactly that. Measuring is key in this.
So, our third tip is selecting the right protocol and endpoint for your vGPU. A lot of customers forget that also the endpoints are really of some influence. They think we're gonna get that vGPU, all the power is now centrally, and those endpoints, they can be whatever. And that's not really true when dealing with really high-end designing and getting that throughput which is required for those drawings, for instance. But also, I think even office workers need the right kind of endpoints. Can you tell us more about those protocols and endpoints?
Yeah, so when selecting the right protocol, if you look at, for example, Citrix or VMware Horizon, you first have to know what type of workload your is in the VDI environment. For example, if you're using 2D CAD, there are a lot of still images, and it's very precise work. So if something is wrong in the still image, you'll see it with your eye.
So it's also like medical stuff, right? You don't want anything wrong with those 2D images, like pictures from the inside of someone.
Maybe I'm not experienced with that, but for the 2D CAD, you can select. For example, if you're using H.264, it's for Horizon and Citrix, and for frame it's called high color accuracy. If you're using H.264, you can select the YUV. I will share a link which explains everything about H.264. But YUV444, it's called also a lossy compression.
Yeah.
And every pixel is sent over the line. So if you see a round, for example in AutoCAD, it's a black background and a red circle.
Yeah.
And if you're not using YUV444, it's called in Horizon, I guess, high color accuracy, and in Citrix it's allow lossy compression. And then the red round is sharp by the eye, and you can see it like it's on your own workstation. So if you having the default like YUV420, that's more optimized for 3D workloads or objects moving very fast through the screen. It's also used on your Blu-ray discs.
Okay.
But if you having a still image on YUV420, the round it's a little bit blurry because the black is more getting over the red, so it's not that sharp for your eye, and it's also more aliasing. Anti-aliasing is more sharper rounds, and it's more like. So if you're using H.264, the default is YUV420, and you can decode it on a lot of endpoints, like your Windows endpoint or a Mac endpoint, or even an ARM-based like a Raspberry Pi as an H.264 decoder, which can decode YUV420. But if you're going to YUV444, not every decoder can decode it. So if you're using, for example, Citrix, it can only be decoded by the Workspace app on a Windows endpoint.
Okay.
So if you're using another endpoint which is not Windows, for example a MacBook, then you will have a degraded user experience when logging in to a YUV444 configured protocol.
So I think that maybe that's already a really good tip for the performance. You know, if you're watching this vlog and you're thinking, okay, I have performance issue when users sign into to our Citrix desktop from a Mac. Well, here you have the answer. You know, 444 compression works on the Windows side. It doesn't work that great, so on the Mac side.
No, like it's falling back to thin wire lossless compression. So if you have moving images, it will be very shocky because it needs a lot of bandwidth and also uses a lot of CPU. If you're using Horizon, I did a study on this with a colleague of mine, and you can decode it on the Linux thin client, YUV444, but it will use a lot of CPU power. It's also on your MacBook.
Yeah.
So if you're using Horizon and set up a session like this, the battery will drain fast on your laptop. And then you want the H.264 YUV444 on low bandwidth use cases, like the H.264 is compressing the stream. So if you have low bandwidth usage, you are going for that scenario. Another option is to use thin wire if you're, for example, in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So it's just JPEG compression, and then the image is also clear when you're receiving the JPEG.
A lot of bandwidth.
Yeah, that's using more bandwidth. So Citrix also has an option. It's called, I think, build to lossless.
Yeah.
And then it's using the YUV420 when you have moving images, and when the picture in the VDI session is still, it sends you the JPEG for the final one, so you can see another sharp line, then it's sharp.
Okay.
It's like every time I see it's like, did something move?
So I think it's also important to think about, do you have enough bandwidth, let's say internally, if you're connected to Storefront, maybe set a different policy that the settings can be higher. It can be 444 or it can be built to lossless. But when you're outside, maybe do a different kind of
exactly. And I also noticed some other very interesting thing. It's like the HTML5 clients from VM, Citrix, and Frame. They behave different in different browsers. Like
really?
Yeah. I can share some details with you from the investigation. Like the best experience you will have in Chrome.
Okay.
And Chrome is the only one from all the vendors which has an option for YUV 444 or H.264 decoding. And Frame is also using some type of this. It's called HQ, and in our experience, Frame has the best user experience in a browser.
Yeah, and then you're talking about Nutanix Frame, right?
Yeah. And if you're using Firefox, for example, for some reason they don't have all the options like Chrome, and then the user experience will decrease. And even if you are using legacy browsers like Internet Explorer or Safari, then the user experience will decrease even more.
So if you're now watching this as a system administrator dealing with some performance issue with vGPU, you're gonna have a hell of a time, because different browsers have a different result, different endpoints have a different result, different endpoint OSs have a different result, different policies have a different result. So I can understand that you would probably go mad with all these things. But luckily you guys, you're part of Team RGE, Remote Graphic Experts. You guys have a website, and on that website you can find all kinds of these informations and test and see a more in-depth than I know we already go really in-depth in this vlog, but that is even going more and more in-depth. So I would really advise you go to that website, read about it if you're having these issues, and figure out what's the best for you.
And one tip from my part, and it makes life more easier, because there is some awesome community tool called Remote Display Analyzer.
Yeah.
And there's a community edition for free, but also a paid license, so you can switch all the protocol settings real time.
Yeah.
And that will give you a good tool to test your endpoint and the protocol, to switch real time some policy settings of the protocol, and then see it in real time what it means for your workload.
Yes.
So that's an awesome tool if you want to experience all the different settings and the user experience on the fly.
Yeah, especially that, right? On the fly changing of graphical settings, because or else you're just shooting, right? You're just changing one thing, okay, you need to log in again, what's different. On the fly is really handy. So the RD Analyzer is really handy, and the Team RGE website, which I will link in the vlog. So that brings us to our next tip. The next tip is single thread CPU performance. I myself have been to a lot of customers that are thinking about going with vGPUs. So they already work with virtual apps, setup. Everyone has a thin client, everything is working there, and you probably see that one group of people still have really fat clients, really tough computers, and those are usually the people who work with COD in the office. And a lot of companies are now thinking about let's make sure that those people can also do their work from home, work on the fly. So let's get rid of those fat clients and let's give them also a thin client. And they have all those experience with virtual apps and setup, and everyone is already working with it. And usually what they do is just, okay, let's just get another setup host, and let's buy another HP DL380 Gen 10 and just put the same CPUs in there as we use for our setup service, and all we need to do is add a GPU and it will work great for those for those people who work with COD. And what I have seen a lot with customers is that doesn't really work, because the most setup CPUs are low thread speed and a lot of cores. So you can split those workloads for all those workers who work on the server, because you have on a setup server, for instance, 20 people working. With VDIs and graphics, you give one CPU to one user, or one virtual CPU to one user. And now you see that even if you give them something like 4 cores, 4 vCPUs, from the same kind of CPUs as the setup server, you see a lot of problems because usually those CPUs are around 2 gigahertz. And what people are forgetting often is that COD really uses a lot of single-thread processors. And how faster that thread is, how faster the experience for the end user is.
Exactly.
So those people who were in that office and had those fat clients, they probably had Xeon processors in that fat clients from 8 years back. But they were at 3.5 gigahertz or 3.2 gigahertz. And they are now, here is your new VDI. We put a really big graphical card in it. Everything should be a lot better. But the processing speed is 2 gigahertz. And other card just almost quit. It is not working, and people are like, oh, I want my old PC back from 8 years, my old 8-year-old PC back. I have seen that at multiple customers. So that's the tip is really the single-threaded CPU performance. Don't underestimate that. So really get CPUs with more than 3 gigahertz of performance. Even when you're thinking about going to a cloud provider, is it public or is it private or whatever, and they give you an option for GPUs, also there check out, okay, but what's the CPU speed, right? Because it's great to go to the cloud, but you get a lot of GPU power, but if those single thread is still low, it's not really working and not worth the time. So it's also going to the next step. Watch out for that. So and that brings us to our final tip. Tip 5, licensing. So check about licensing. In the early days of vGPUs, you would just buy a grid K1 or K2, you put it in your machine, and you were almost ready to go. You had some hypervising licensing. That's not the case at the moment anymore with NVIDIA. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, because if you're looking at licensing, we got three players here, like AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA. Like NVIDIA is the only one at the moment you need licensing for the vGPU. You have 3 types of licensing. One is for the applications, vApps, it's for server-based computing. You got virtual PC, it's more for the office workers. And you got the virtual data center quadro workstation full license.
It's really for the CAD.
It's for the CAD engineers. And I want to share some experience with the NVIDIA licensing. And that's one tip for me. It's like, it's called concurrent use license, but it's more like concurrent VDI license. And if you want to configure a high available active VDI environment, you have to very look carefully about
double your license.
Maybe you have to contact your license reseller to especially provide that scenario. On the other hand, you also have to look at the hypervisor license. For example, if you are using Horizon, you already have VMware vSphere, and you are capable of using vGPU on in the licensing bundle. If you are using Citrix, for example, and you have the VMware hypervisor, and you can only do vGPU with the Enterprise Plus license. Yeah. So maybe for the Citrix use case, it's better in a non-persistent environment to switch over to Send Server.
Yeah, like from the hypervisor.
Yeah, you're already entitled to that hypervisor to use GPU, or maybe consider Nutanix if you are having Nutanix. You can use GPUs over there. Yeah, and in the cloud you also have to, you can buy it with the NV series, for example, but there are also some VM types. I know, like the NC series.
In Azure.
In Azure you still have to bring the license, so you have. You have to dig into that.
So, to keep it simple, it's not just You buy a card, you plug it in, and it's working. You have to check out the licensing of the card, you have to check out the hypervisor licensing, even going to the cloud, check out those licensing. So that was our last tip. Thank you very much for giving us all these insights about vGPU. As I said, I will link to the RD Analyzer and Team RGE and your own personal blog in this video. And for now, thank you for watching, and till the next one, and maybe we have Patrick again sometime. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.